Hello and welcome back, dear viewers. For my 50th video, I want to take you back to a very decisive point in synth history, namely the late 90s. In 97, Propeller shook the world and my very life by releasing Rebirth 338. I'm pretty sure this piece of software was an introduction to millions of people, not just music professionals, to the wondrous world of software synths. The late 90s, as well as the early 2000s, were also a time when the internet was still pretty much like the Wild West. Software piracy was rampant, and thanks to a very well organized cracking and piracy scene, it was more than easy to obtain anything software, either online, via file sharing, or more traditional in the form of burned CDRs shared among peers on schoolyards the world over. So when Steinberg established the VST 2.0 standard in 1999, it paved the way for a world of music production pretty much without any hardware synths at all. Sure, there had been trackers and other types of music software that could generate sounds around for years, but at this point of synth and music production history, for the first time it was possible for pretty much anyone without much skill, effort or money to create sophisticated, professional sounding tracks on your family PC. Anyone could be a producer now, and a lot of people tried. Sure, 99.9% of this output ended up being rubbish, but 0.1 of 100 million still is a lot, and the world ended up with a ton of new and exciting music, and many artists that got a foothold around the late 90s are still around today. It clearly was a golden age of bedroom producers. Another effect this era had was that while anyone was using their products, software synth and music production software creators really struggled to turn a profit, because even professionals often resorted to pirated plugins. Direct online software sales simply weren't established as much back then, and soft synths were often still sold in those big bulky boxes they still use to advertise them even today. Even though they only exist as renders these days, in the past these boxes often came with complicated hard or software dongles to prevent piracy, which of course they didn't. Traditional hardware producers themselves struggled too, and while those who made MIDI controllers and keyboards thrived, the writing for real hardware synths, samplers and drum machines seemed to be on the wall. Why spend thousands of dollars for a hardware setup that also took up a lot of space, when you could have all the world's sounds readily available on your Pentium-equipped E-machines, Compaq or Packard Bell PC running a WinXP copy you've installed using the magical serial number everyone used back then. You know, the one starting with FCKGW. So, this has been kind of a long introduction for today's synth, but I just wanted to make sure you all got a little background to understand why this is such an unique and unlikely piece of hardware. The Waldorf Record Tag is the physical manifestation of one of those software VSTs born out of the area I described earlier. The Tag Percussion Synthesizer was released in 2001 as a VST plugin by Waldorf and instantly became one of my all-time favorite VSTs I used once I acquired it in the early 2000s. It was so unique and powerful sounding that some attack was squeezed into pretty much anything I did back then. So, much later when I took up collecting the actual hardware synths I couldn't afford as a teen, I was absolutely baffled when I learned that Waldorf had also released a hardware version of the attack in 2002. Ages before others came up with their concepts of transplanting software synths back into a hardware environment. I instantly wanted it, but it took me several years to find one at an even remotely affordable price. I guess that many of these freaks of nature were sold back then. I'm also certain that people who own the Record Tag are holding onto it, knowing what precious gem they've got. My Record Tag is by far the most expensive and rare synth in my collection, and while expensive and rare stuff isn't usually featured on this channel, I still think it fits the concept well, because it's very much a rejected synth. There are only about half a dozen clips about it on YouTube, so for the sake of documenting its history, let's have a look at the Waldorf Record Tag. From a first glimpse, the Record Tag might look familiar for some of you, as the same casing and almost identical layout were used for the Micro Cue. We'll have a more detailed look at the unit in the next part of the video. Let's first have a look under the hood, at the Record Tag's unique sound engine. Each of the Record Tag's 24 voices offers two oscillators spitting out sine, triangle, saw or square waves. Noise, a choice of two hi-hat or one crash sample, or, rather uncommon, a sample and hold generator that can also be used as an oscillator. Plus, you can configure one of the audio inputs as an oscillator. The two oscillators can be ring modulated and be configured to perform FM. In the oscillator mix section, a unique crack modulator can be applied for clap sounds before it is sent to the filter, which can be set to 7 different configurations. The filter and the amp section that follows have individual ADSR envelopes, which both are, as you would expect for a synth built for percussion, very snappy indeed. The last step of the signal is an FX section that offers 4 individual effects. Each voice can be set to pass through only one of those sections, so no FX chaining here. The individual voice signals can then be sent to one or multiple of the 6 outputs. There are also 2 individual LFOs that can be sent to sine, triangle, saw, square, as well as random and sample and hold. These LFOs can be used to modulate oscillators, filter and amp parameter. In total, the Record Tag synth engine offers hundreds if not thousands of parameters, because most of the parameters mentioned above can be set individually for each of the 24 voices. In theory, you can create a ton of different types of sounds. And to make things even more mind-blowing, you can configure the record tech to a mode where 12 of the 24 sounds can be played polyphonically on individual MIDI channels, all at the same time. While the synth engine is very much tailored towards percussive sounds, it's still flexible enough to create a very wide array of sounds, from basses to leads to pads. Waldorf certainly were aware of this because they included demo tracks showcasing that the record tech is much more than just percussion. Let's actually listen to one of those demos now to give you an idea of what this thing can do. Here's my personal favorite, demo number 3. And now, back to the outside of the record tech. Starting at the front, you are greeted, as I've already mentioned earlier, with a very familiar shell. Starting at the left, there's a front-facing headphone input, which is always a welcome sight. There's an LCD screen, below it you find 2 continuous controller knobs and above it 4 buttons, 3 of which you can use to trigger predefined sounds. This way you can audition sounds directly from the machine and even do some finger drumming. Next to the display you'll find Waldorf's trademark big ass red knob, another continuous controller and several other buttons used to navigate and control multiple settings. The right half of the unit is dominated by a matrix style control section. It can be used to quickly edit and modify sounds in real time. To the very right there's a power button that also functions as a MIDI panic button, stopping on notes being played when tapped. The record tech sure has quite a lot of front control elements, many of which also have secondary functions accessed by pressing the shift key. All in all, the controls can be a bit confusing at times and make for a very German interface design experience. The back of the unit is a lot less confusing. There's a single stereo input jack, so you'll need an adapter and a dedicated cable to use both inputs. There are 6 individual outputs that can be configured as mono stereo ports, a full MIDI trio and a socket for the power adapter. There's also a mysterious hole to the very right that is not mentioned in the user manual. If by any chance someone from Waldorf sees this, let us in on the reason for the hole, won't you? Okay, so much for the talking part, let's start to listen to some sounds. Starting with some simple drum patterns created with some of the preset drum kits. Next, let's have a look at the plugin mode. If you set the record tag to this operation mode, 12 of the sounds of each drum kit can be played polyphonically on individual MIDI channels. This way we can add some stabs, leads and pads without the need for any additional synths. For some reason, the engineers at Waldorf thought they should still add some more features to this already incredibly versatile machine, and so there's another thing to demo, the built-in pattern sequencer. You can create a rhythmic pattern for all 24 sounds of each drum kit on the machine itself, and trigger these patterns by pressing the corresponding key on a MIDI keyboard. It's a feature that we've already seen in similar form in the Alesis Micron or M-Audio Venom. It's quite fun to play around with it, as I will show you now. And now, of course there's one more thing to do. I've tried to create my own demo song using a single record tag set to plugin mode. Hope you like it. So, once again we are at the end of the video. I hope I was able to do the awesome record tech justice. It certainly was way ahead of its time when it was released in 2002, and 20 years later it still packs quite a punch, and I really can't think of any recent synth that can offer anything similar. As I've already said earlier, record techs seem to be quite rare and hard to find. So if you're struggling to find one yourself, there's at least a way to get some attack quick and easy. In 2019 Waldorf released an iOS attack app that isn't a direct port of the VST, but at least offers a pretty convincing experience on the go. So that's all for my 50th video. Don't worry, I've already bought just about enough gear for the next 50. So see you soon with another synth.